Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're diving into something a little different. A world where magic and medicine were the same thing. Where your neighbour could curse you with a glance and where the wrong dream could get you executed. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe dim the lights, settle into your favourite spot. And if you enjoy these deep dives into history's strangest corners, go ahead and subscribe. It really helps us keep bringing you these stories. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing our community from around the world. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey together. In 1536, Anne Boleyn was executed for witchcraft. Not officially, that charge was treason and adultery, but whispered in the halls of Hampton Court, scrawled in letters between terrified courtiers, and repeated by commoners in taverns across England was another story. Anne Boleyn had used dark magic to seduce the king. She had 6 fingers on one hand, a third nipple hidden beneath her gown, a strawberry birthmark on her neck that proved she'd made a pact with Satan. None of it was true, but in Tudor England, truth didn't matter. What mattered was belief, and belief could kill you. What you need to understand is that nearly everyone, from the king himself down to the filthiest beggar, lived in a world where invisible forces controlled everything. Where saying the wrong word at the wrong time could curse your crops. Where spilling salt meant certain death was coming. Where the position of the moon determined whether you'd survive childbirth. These weren't just quirky old beliefs passed down through families like recipes for stew. They were survival mechanisms in a world that made absolutely no sense. People died suddenly and inexplicably. Plagues swept through villages overnight. Healthy children stopped breathing in their sleep. And there was no explanation. No germ theory, no antibiotics, no understanding of disease or infection or basic hygiene. So the mind, desperate for answers, created them. And those answers involved magic, curses, demons, and the constant, gnawing terror that you might anger the wrong force and pay with your life. The Tudors weren't stupid, they were terrified, and their superstitions reveal something far darker about human nature than you might expect. Because when you peel back the layers of these beliefs, what you find isn't ignorance, it's desperation. It's the human need to control an uncontrollable world, and it's the willingness to destroy anyone at all, if it meant you might survive another day. Let's start with the most dangerous belief in Tudor England, the evil eye. Not some vague concept whispered about in folklore. An actual prosecutable crime that could get someone hanged, burned or drowned depending on the mood of the mob and the mercy of the magistrate. Imagine this. You wake up one morning in 1580. Your child, who was laughing and playing yesterday, now lies feverish and writhing in the straw mattress you share. You've done nothing different. Fed them the same grey porridge. Tucked them into the same scratchy blanket. Let them drink from the same well. But something has changed. Something invisible and malevolent has entered your home. Then you remember. Yesterday, old Margaret from 3 houses down stopped you in the muddy lane. She asked for milk. You said no. You barely had enough for your own family, and her request felt like an accusation, a judgment on your generosity. And she looked at you. Really looked at you. Her eyes lingered too long on your face. She muttered something under her breath as she walked away, her hunched back disappearing into the morning mist. And now your child is dying. In Tudor England, this wasn't paranoia. This was evidence. Margaret had overlooked your child, cursed them with the evil eye. She'd projected her envy, her bitterness, her malevolent energy directly into your innocent baby's soul. And everyone in your village would agree with you. They'd nod knowingly. They'd whisper that they'd always suspected Margaret, that she'd always been strange, that her chickens laid too many eggs, which was obviously unnatural, that her cow never seemed to get sick when everyone else's did. The belief in the evil eye was so widespread that it transcended class entirely. Queen Elizabeth I herself wore protective amulets tucked into her bodice. Nobles paid fortunes for charms, blessed by priests, or crafted by cunning women. And commoners? They lived in constant terror of it. Every interaction was a potential curse. Every envious glance was a threat. Here's how it supposedly worked. Certain people, usually the elderly, the poor, or anyone considered other, possessed an innate ability to project malevolent energy through their gaze. They didn't even need to mean harm. Their envy alone, their resentment at seeing others with more food, healthier children, better fortune, could curdle milk, kill livestock, or strike down babies. It was involuntary, this power. Like a disease they carried. And like a disease, it had to be eliminated. The signs were everywhere. Did your butter refuse to churn after Margaret walked past your dairy? Someone with the evil eye had been near. Did your beer go sour overnight after she asked for bread, and you refused? She'd looked at your barrels with bitterness. Did your horse suddenly go lame after you passed her on the road? You'd been cursed for your prosperity. And the cure? Brutal and public. If you suspected someone of cursing you, you had to draw their blood, scratch them with your fingernails, strike them with a rock, make them bleed. The blood would supposedly break the spell, sever the connection between their malevolent energy and your suffering. This wasn't folklore. This was practiced regularly, often violently, and with community support. Neighbours would hold the accused while the victim scratched. Crowds would gather to watch. And the law, remarkably, often turned a blind eye. Women especially were targeted. Old women who lived alone. Poor women who begged for scraps. Women who had cats, those demonic familiars. Women who knew herbal remedies and could ease a fever or stop bleeding. Women who talked back to their husbands. Women who didn't smile enough at church. Women who smiled too much at other women's husbands. Women who had red hair or mismatched eyes or a birthmark shaped wrong. Women who'd buried too many of their own children and might be envious of yours. The accusation alone could destroy you. Even if you weren't executed, and many were, your life was over. Your neighbours would shun you. Children would throw stones. Your home might be burned by vigilantes convinced they were protecting the village. Your livestock killed just in case they carried your curse. And you'd live the rest of your days, however many you had left, as a pariah, sleeping in ditches, eating scraps, waiting to die. But here's the truly chilling part. People genuinely believed this. The terror was real. In a world without understanding of disease, without doctors who could actually help, without any medical explanation for why a healthy child could be laughing one day and convulsing the next, the evil eye made perfect sense. It gave people a target, a reason, someone to blame. And blame in Tudor England was always followed by blood. Because if your child died and you did nothing, if you didn't identify the curse and eliminate it, what would the neighbours think? That you were weak? That you deserved it? That maybe, just maybe, you were in league with the evil yourself? Suspicion was contagious. And so was violence. Now let's talk about the opposite of cursing. Divine healing. Specifically, the royal touch, a ritual so bizarre, so deeply believed in, that thousands of sick people lined up for years, sometimes travelling hundreds of miles on foot, to experience it. The king's or queen's laying on of hands to cure scrofula. Scrofula, by the way, was tuberculosis of the lymph nodes. It caused grotesque swelling in the neck, weeping sores that oozed pus and blood, fever, wasting, and often death. The Tudors called it the king's evil, because they believed only a divinely appointed monarch could cure it. Only someone chosen by God himself, anointed with holy oil, crowned in ceremony, could touch the festering neck of a commoner and make the sickness disappear. Here's how it worked. Several times a year, the monarch would hold special ceremonies at court. Sick people, mostly the poor and desperate, would be brought forward. They'd kneel before the throne, often weeping, their necks wrapped in dirty bandages to hide the horror beneath. The king or queen would approach, carefully, delicately, and touch the swollen lymph nodes with their royal fingers. They'd make the sign of the cross over the afflicted area and hang a gold coin, called an angel, around the person's neck on a white ribbon. Then they'd pray. The monarch would recite, "They shall lay hands on the sick and they shall recover." And some of them did. Not because of magic, of course. Tuberculosis sometimes goes into remission naturally. Swelling can reduce without treatment. Sores can heal. The human body, remarkably resilient, can fight off infection even in the worst conditions. But in Tudor England, those recoveries were proof of divine monarchy, proof that God had chosen this particular family to rule, proof that the king or queen wasn't just a political leader, but a conduit for heavenly power. Henry VIII touched hundreds during his reign. Henry VIII touched thousands. Despite being, by most accounts, a murderous tyrant with increasingly questionable hygiene as his leg ulcers festered and his weight ballooned. Even the Protestant boy King Edward VI continued the practice, though he was deeply uncomfortable with what he saw as Catholic superstition. He'd been raised to believe in faith alone, not rituals and ceremonies, but his advisors insisted. The people expected it, and so he touched necks, trying not to grimace at the smell. Mary Offiza, the Catholic Queen, touched people with fervent belief. She saw it as proof of her legitimacy after years of being declared a bastard by her father. Every healing was a vindication. Every recovery was God's endorsement of her reign. And Elizabeth V, she performed the ritual reluctantly at first, seeing it as medieval nonsense. But she was a politician above all else. She understood power. She understood theatre. And if touching sick people's festering necks convinced them she was chosen by God, well, she'd do it. She'd smile graciously, make the sign of the cross, and hand out those gold angels while privately washing her hands with vinegar afterward. Thousands flocked to these ceremonies. They'd camp outside palaces for days, waiting for their turn. Some claimed miraculous cures. Most went home still sick, still dying, clutching their angel coins like talismans, believing they'd been touched by divinity even as they coughed blood into rags and felt their lymph nodes continue to swell. But here's what makes this superstition so fascinating. It worked, not medically, politically. The royal touch reinforced the idea of the divine right of kings. It made the monarch seem magical, untouchable, chosen. It gave the sick hope, which is sometimes all people have. And it gave the crown legitimacy in an era when legitimacy was constantly questioned, when rebellions simmered and pretenders to the throne appeared with alarming regularity. If God himself worked through the king's hands, how could anyone justify overthrowing him? The ceremony continued for another century after the Tudors, only ending in the early 1700s when the Enlightenment finally began to chip away at such medieval thinking. But for a brief, bizarre period in English history, your best chance at curing a fatal disease wasn't medicine. It was royalty. It was kneeling before a monarch, feeling their hand on your festering neck, and believing with all your heart that God worked through their fingertips. Even when that same monarch was simultaneously beheading wives, burning heretics, and starving peasants through ruinous taxes. Even when their own bodies were rotting from syphilis, or their minds were deteriorating from lead poisoning. Even when everything about them suggested they were just as mortal, just as flawed, just as human as everyone else. The crown touched you, and you believed. And belief, even false belief, gave people something to hold on to in a world where death was always waiting. Childbirth in Tudor England was a death sentence waiting to happen. And everyone knew it. Everyone had attended a birth that ended in screaming, in blood that wouldn't stop flowing, in a baby born blue and silent, in a mother who smiled weakly and then closed her eyes and never opened them again. 1 in 3 women died in childbirth or shortly after from infection, hemorrhage, or exhaustion. Babies died at staggering rates, nearly half before reaching age 5. And in the face of such relentless horror, superstition didn't just creep in, it ruled with absolute authority. Let's start with what you had to do before the baby even arrived. Never, ever cross a graveyard while pregnant. The the spirits of the dead could enter your womb and possess your child. If you absolutely had to pass through a cemetery, perhaps to reach the market on the other side, or visit a relative, you needed to carry iron. Scissors, a nail, a horseshoe, anything iron. Iron disrupted spiritual energy, created a barrier between the living and the dead. You'd clutch it in your fist, whisper prayers, and walk as quickly as your swollen body allowed. Don't look at anything ugly, deformed, or frightening while pregnant. The Tudors believed in maternal impression, the idea that whatever a pregnant woman saw could physically mark her baby. Saw a hair running across your path? Your baby might be born with a cleft lip, called a hair lip because of the resemblance. Saw a beggar with a twisted leg? Your child could be born crippled. Witnessed a hanging at the town square? Your baby might be strangled by the umbilical cord, born with the rope marks of your horror etched into its tiny neck. This belief was so strong that pregnant noblewomen were kept in darkened rooms during the final months, seeing only pleasant things. They were surrounded by tapestries of beautiful gardens, fed sweet foods, and told cheerful stories. Musicians played gentle melodies, servants brought flowers, anything to ensure the baby wouldn't be marked by horror, by fear, by the ugliness of the world outside. The moon controlled everything. Conceiving during a waning moon meant the baby would be weak, sickly, prone to early death. Giving birth during a full moon meant an easy delivery, the lunar pull helping to bring the baby down. A new moon? Complications, probably death for mother or child, or both. Women tracked their cycles against the lunar calendar, tried to time conception, prayed their labour wouldn't begin during the dark moon. Now let's talk about the actual birth. No men allowed, ever. Not your husband, not your father, not even a male doctor unless you were nobility and dying and the family was desperate enough to call one. Childbirth was exclusively a woman's space, a secret, sacred, terrifying space where men were forbidden to tread. The husband would be sent away, often to a tavern, to drink and pray and pretend he wasn't terrified that he'd return to find his wife dead and his child gone. The birthing room was sealed, windows covered with heavy cloth, doors closed and sometimes locked, candles lit, creating a warm, flickering glow. This was to keep evil spirits out, but it also made the room stifling, airless, filthy. Infection was almost guaranteed. The bed would be covered in old linens, stained from previous births, never properly cleaned. The floor would be strewn with herbs, rosemary and lavender, to mask the smell of blood and bodily fluids. The midwife, if you could afford one, would arrive with her bag of charms, smooth stones polished by rivers, to rub on the labouring woman's belly, dried herbs to burn for protection, and most importantly, an eagle stone. Eagle stones were hollow rocks, often containing smaller stones inside that rattled when shaken. The Tudors believed eagles used them to ease egg-laying, so they must work for human birth too. The logic was simple and absurd, and completely believed. The midwife would tie the eagle stone to the woman's thigh during labour and remove it immediately after birth. Leaving it on too long would cause the womb to fall out, to prolapse and dangle between the legs, like some grotesque punishment. And yes, this happened. Women died from it. But the eagle stone stayed in use because when births went well, the stone received credit. And when they went badly, clearly the midwife had removed it too late or tied it wrong. If the baby was taking too long, the midwife had options. She could make the woman sneeze violently to shake the baby loose, holding pepper or snuff to her nose until she convulsed with sneezing. She could give her wine mixed with powdered pearls, which were believed to ease the passage. She could have her walk in circles while reciting prayers, sometimes for hours, the labouring woman stumbling and weeping, while other women held her arms. She could tie a snakeskin around her belly, the snake being a symbol of transformation and rebirth. She could place a lodestone, a magnetic rock, on her abdomen to draw the baby down with invisible force. If none of that worked, there was always manual extraction. The midwife would reach inside, often without washing her hands, without any understanding of infection, and try to turn the baby, pull it out, force it through a birth canal that might be too narrow or torn or hemorrhaging. Without anesthesia, without antiseptic, without mercy, the mortality rate was staggering. For every baby successfully extracted, 2 mothers died of infection in the days that followed. And if the mother died, the baby had to be cut out immediately. Even if the mother had just taken her last breath, even if the baby was clearly already dead, it had to be baptized before it died, even if it was already beyond saving. An unbaptized soul couldn't enter heaven. Better a dead baptized baby than a living damned one. The midwife would take a knife, cut open the dead mother's abdomen, reach in with blood up to her elbows, and pull out the infant. A priest would be waiting, holy water ready, to baptize the tiny corpse, while the mother's body cooled on the bed. Baptism had its own superstitions. The baby had to be baptized within days, preferably hours of birth. Every moment unbaptized was a moment Satan could steal the soul. Fairies could swap your baby for a changeling. Demons could possess it. The church would schedule emergency baptisms, sometimes in the middle of the night, because waiting was too dangerous. Baptism water was considered so powerful that people would steal it. Yes, steal holy water from baptismal fonts to use in love spells, healing potions, or curses. Churches had to lock the fonts or station guards during the night. And if your baby was sickly, if it wailed constantly and refused to nurse and seemed to be fading before your eyes, there were dozens of superstitions to try. Pass it through a split ash tree at dawn. Find an ash tree that had been struck by lightning, split the trunk carefully, pass the naked baby through the opening, and the tree would close, taking the sickness with it. Wash it in urine, preferably someone else's, ideally from a healthy young man. Lay it on a Bible overnight, the holy book's presence driving out whatever dark force inhabited the child. Tie red coral beads around its neck to protect against evil, the colour red being life and blood and vitality. Feed it bread soaked in breast milk mixed with crushed snails. Hang a dead mole around its neck, the mole being an animal that lived underground and therefore had power over death. None of this worked, obviously, but when your baby is dying and there are no doctors, no medicine, no understanding of infection or disease, when every day in Tudor England felt like a gamble with death, you'll try anything, you'll believe anything, you'll do anything if it means your child might take one more breath, open its eyes one more time, live one more day. And sometimes, rarely, miraculously, babies survived. When they did, it was proof the superstition worked. The eagle stone had aligned, the prayers had been heard, the ash tree had taken the sickness. When they didn't, when they died anyway, and so many did, it was because the curse was too strong. The mother had sinned, or God was testing the family with unimaginable cruelty. You couldn't win. Childbirth in Tudor England wasn't just dangerous, it was a battlefield of invisible forces, and women fought with charms, prayers and hope, most of them lost. Now forget witches and royal healing for a moment. Let's talk about the small everyday superstitions that governed every single action in Tudor life. The ones that seem ridiculous now, but could genuinely make people panic, change their entire day, refuse to leave the house. Spilling salt was a catastrophe, not just because salt was expensive, though it was, worth its weight in silver in some regions, but because it meant death was coming. Someone in your household would die within the year. The moment the salt hit the floor, everyone would freeze. The only way to counter it was to throw a pinch of the spilled salt over your left shoulder, directly into the devil's face. He was always lurking there, just behind your left ear, waiting for you to slip up, to make a mistake, to give him an opening. The salt would blind him temporarily, break the curse, save your family. Breaking a mirror didn't just mean 7 years of bad luck. Mirrors were believed to hold pieces of your soul. When you looked into one, your reflection wasn't just light bouncing off glass. It was a fragment of your essence, trapped in the surface. Shatter it, and you fractured your very self. Worse, demons could climb through the broken shards, use them as portals, and possess you from the inside. People who broke mirrors would immediately gather every single piece, even the tiniest shard, wrap them in cloth, and bury them at a crossroads at midnight to confuse the demons. Putting shoes on the table was inviting death into the house. Shoes carried the dirt of the outside world, including graveyard soil, the mud from execution sites, the filth from diseased streets. Placing them on a table where food was prepared was basically asking the Grim Reaper to join you for dinner. If someone did it by accident, the entire table would have to be scrubbed with salt water, blessed by whoever was most religious in the household, and left unused for 3 days. Opening an umbrella indoors was offensive to the sun god. Yes, even in Christian England, even with churches on every corner and priests preaching hellfire, people clung to old pagan ideas. The umbrella mimicked the sun's protection. Opening it indoors suggested you didn't trust the sun, that you thought your home needed shielding from its rays. It would anger the heavens and bring storms, illness, or financial ruin. Seeing a single magpie was terrible luck. One for sorrow, the rhyme went. You had to salute it, spit 3 times, and say, "Good morning, Mr. Magpie, how's your wife?" If you didn't, if you just walked past and ignored it, misfortune would follow. Your crops would fail, your child would fall ill, your husband would lose his job. People would stop in the middle of the road, sometimes blocking carts and causing problems, just to properly greet a magpie. Walking under a ladder was not just dangerous, though ladders could fall. It was sacrilegious. A ladder leaning against a wall formed a triangle, a symbol of the Holy Trinity. Walking through it was desecration, breaking the sacred geometry, showing disrespect to God himself. Some people believed walking under a ladder would prevent you from entering heaven. Others thought it would cause immediate bad luck. Either way, people would go far out of their way, adding extra minutes to their journey, just to avoid passing beneath. Cutting your nails on Sunday was forbidden. Friday and Sunday nail cutting was seen as unlucky and disrespectful to God. There was a whole rhyme about it. Cut them on Monday, you'd have good news. Tuesday, you'd gain wealth. Wednesday, you'd travel. Thursday, nothing special. Friday, you'd face sorrow. Saturday, you'd meet a new love. Sunday, the devil would control you all week. People would schedule their grooming around this, genuinely believing that the day they trimmed their nails determined their fate. Hearing a dog howl at night meant someone nearby was dying. Dogs could see death approaching, could sense it in the air like smoke. If the howling stopped at your door, it was someone in your house. People would beat their dogs to make them stop, believing it might delay the inevitable, might confuse death and send it to a different home. The screams of beaten dogs mixed with the howling created a horrible symphony in Tudor neighbourhoods at night. Seeing your doppelganger, your exact double, was a death omen. It meant your soul was already preparing to leave your body, was practicing the separation. Several Tudor-era accounts describe people seeing themselves walking in the distance, wearing the same clothes, moving the same way, only to die days later. Some claim to have met their double, spoken to it, watched it smile with their own smile before disappearing into mist. Sneezing required immediate action. When you sneezed, your soul briefly left your body through your nose. That's why someone had to say, "God bless you," instantly, to prevent demons from entering the empty vessel. If no one said it, you had to say it yourself, quickly, desperately, before something evil took residence inside you. Multiple sneezes in a row meant multiple souls leaving, multiple chances for possession. And here's one that caused genuine distress. Counting your teeth was strictly forbidden. If you counted them, you'd lose one for each time you did it. Dentistry being non-existent, losing teeth was already guaranteed by age 30, but counting them supposedly sped up the process, called death to your mouth, invited rot. People would desperately try not to count even when teeth were loose or painful, fearing that acknowledging the number would doom the rest. Dropping a knife meant a man would visit, dropping a fork meant a woman, dropping a spoon meant a child. This was taken so seriously that when utensils fell, people would prepare for guests, start cooking extra food, tidy the house, even though no one was expected. If no one arrived, it meant the visitor had died on the way, and you'd wait nervously for news of which neighbour or relative had met misfortune on the road. Peacock feathers in the house were absolutely banned. The eyes on the feathers were the evil eye itself, watching you constantly, curse compounded into decoration. Bringing them indoors invited disaster, illness, and death. This superstition was so strong that even nobles, who loved exotic decorations, avoided them. Queens who received them as gifts would immediately have them burned. Rats leaving a house meant it was about to collapse. Rats, being clever creatures connected to the underworld, supposedly knew when structural failure was imminent. If you saw rats fleeing, you fled too. There are accounts of entire families abandoning homes because rats left, only to return days later when nothing happened, or sometimes to find the house had indeed fallen during a storm. And then there were dream omens. Dreams weren't just dreams, they were prophecies, messages from God or demons or your own soul trying to warn you. Dreaming of teeth falling out meant death in the family. Dreaming of fish meant someone was pregnant. Dreaming of muddy water meant trouble ahead. Dreaming of a white horse meant good fortune. Dreaming of climbing a mountain meant ambition would be rewarded. Dreaming of falling meant you'd fail at something important. Dreaming of fire meant passion, anger, or literal fire in your future. So you check every candle twice before bed. People kept dream journals, consulted wise women to interpret them, made life decisions based on what they saw in their sleep. A merchant might cancel a business trip because he dreamed of muddy water. A woman might reject a marriage proposal because she dreamed of falling. Dreams had more authority than logic, than common sense, than the evidence of your waking eyes. Now, you might think these are harmless quirks, silly beliefs that didn't really matter, that were just part of the colourful tapestry of Tudor life. But they did matter. These superstitions controlled behaviour, dictated social interactions, caused paranoia. If your neighbour's dog howled at your door, they'd avoid you, fearing you carried death. If you accidentally spilled salt at a dinner party, the meal would end in awkward silence, as everyone wondered who would die. If you forgot to salute a magpie, you'd spend the entire day anxious, jumping at shadows, interpreting every minor inconvenience as the beginning of your prophesied misfortune. And here's the truly insidious part. These beliefs reinforced a worldview where nothing was random. Everything was a sign. Every action had cosmic weight. Every mistake could doom you. You couldn't just live. You had to constantly monitor your environment, your behaviour, your thoughts, always searching for omens, always trying to appease invisible forces. It was exhausting, psychologically crushing, and completely inescapable. Even the educated, even those who'd read Latin, even those who secretly doubted, still followed the superstitions. Because what if? What if this one time, this one spilled salt, this one broken mirror was the real curse? What if ignoring it meant your child died tomorrow? In Tudor England, even the smallest mistake could mean you were cursed, and once you believed that, you'd spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for disaster to strike, unable to relax, unable to trust that anything good could last. Love in Tudor England wasn't left to chance, or compatibility, or mutual attraction. It was orchestrated through spells, charms, and potions that ranged from sweet to absolutely deranged. If you wanted someone to fall in love with you, you had options, and most of them involved bodily fluids, theft, and rituals performed at midnight under a waxing moon. Carve their name into an apple, the instructions would say, eat it at midnight under a full moon, and they'd dream of you. Simple, romantic even, if you ignored the fact that you were essentially performing sympathetic magic, binding their subconscious to yours through fruit and moonlight. But when that didn't work, When weeks passed and they still barely noticed you, you'd escalate. Bake a cake with your menstrual blood mixed into the batter, serve it to them, and they'd be bound to you forever. The blood was you, your essence, your fertility, entering their body and claiming them from the inside. Women genuinely did this. Documented cases exist of women being prosecuted for feeding men blood cakes, for attempting to bewitch them through baking. Wear a charm bag filled with rose petals, lavender, and a lock of your own hair around your neck. If the person you desired touched it, even accidentally, brushing against you in a crowded market, they'd fall for you. The charm would transfer your desire into them, plant it like a seed, stare into a mirror at midnight while holding a candle and saying their name 3 times. Their face would appear behind yours in the reflection, and you'd know if the love was mutual. If you saw them clearly, smiling, they felt the same. If the image was distorted or frightening, they hated you. If you saw nothing, they were indifferent, which was somehow worse than hatred. But those were the gentle methods, the ones desperate people used when subtlety wasn't working, when months of longing glances and carefully orchestrated encounters had produced nothing. Let's talk about the aggressive love magic. To bind someone to you permanently, you needed a poppet, a small doll made of cloth, stuffed with straw or wool, and stitched to roughly resemble a human figure. You'd name it after your target, speaking their full name aloud as you worked, imbuing the fabric with their essence. Then you'd prick your finger with a needle, the same needle you'd use to sew the poppet, and let 3 drops of blood fall onto the doll's chest, right where the heart would be. Then you'd sew a piece of their clothing into the poppet's body. Stolen, obviously, a scrap of their shirt, a thread from their hem, anything that had touched their skin, absorbed their sweat, carried their scent. This was the hardest part, breaking into their home or waiting until they left clothing unattended. But without it, the spell wouldn't work. While doing this, you'd recite, "As this doll is bound, so shall they be bound to me. Heart to heart, soul to soul, by this magic made whole." You'd sleep with the poppet under your pillow every night, and supposedly, the target would become obsessed with you. Unable to think of anyone else, consumed by desire they couldn't explain or resist. They'd seek you out, they'd propose marriage, they'd be yours. Now, if that sounds unhinged, wait. Urine magic was enormous, practiced widely, discussed in cunning women's instructions and witch trial confessions. If a woman wanted to make a man desire her, she'd collect his urine. Don't ask how, bribe a servant. Wait until he relieved himself outdoors, steal his chamber pot's contents. Then she'd boil it with honey, rosemary, and her own hair, creating a grotesque brew that smelled like death and desperation. She'd bury the mixture under his doorstep, while saying his name 9 times, and he'd be drawn to her house against his will, his feet carrying him there without conscious thought. Alternatively, she could bake bread using his urine instead of water, feed it to him, and he'd be hers. The bread would taste wrong, obviously, but she'd disguise it with spices or serve it when he was drunk. Men did similar things. They'd mix their semen into wine or stew, serve it to the woman they wanted, and believe she'd become obsessed. This wasn't rare. This was common enough that women were warned never to accept a food or drink from men they didn't know well, not just because of poison, but because of magic. And if you think that's bad, let's talk about corpse magic. If someone wanted to guarantee marriage, not just attraction, but actual legal binding, they'd go to a graveyard at midnight, find a fresh grave, ideally someone who died of love or heartbreak, and dig down until they reach the corpse's hand. They'd cut off a finger with a knife blessed by salt and moonlight, wrap it in black cloth, and bring it home. They'd dry the finger over a low fire, grind it into powder with a mortar and pestle, and mix it into their beloved's food or drink. A dead person's body parts contained lingering life force, the residue of their final emotions. If they died wanting love, that want could be transferred. If they died in despair, their desperation could be weaponized. The Tudors genuinely believed this worked. Court records exist. Witch trials where women confessed to using corpse powder, Sometimes under torture, yes, but the confessions were detailed enough to suggest real practice. Now let's flip it. What if you wanted to break a relationship? Curse a couple? Ruin someone's marriage because you hated them or wanted one of them for yourself? You'd get a toad. Catch a live toad from a pond or stream. Hold it carefully so it didn't piss on you. That was its own curse. And carve the names of the couple into its back with a sharp knife. The toad would writhe and croak. You'd bury it alive in their garden or under their doorstep, while saying, "As this creature dies, so dies their love." As the toad suffocated underground, the couple would grow cold toward each other, fight constantly, sleep in separate beds, eventually separate or live together in misery. If you wanted to speed up the process, you'd also bury iron nails pointing toward their home. Iron disrupted magic and love, the two being intertwined in Tudor thinking, drove wedges between people, made affection curdle into irritation. Or you could use not magic. Take a long piece of string or rope, preferably red, the colour of passion and blood. Tie 9 knots in it while saying with each one, "With this knot I bind their love. With this knot I break their bond. With this knot I separate them. With this knot I curse their union." Each knot represented a barrier, an obstacle between them. As long as the rope stayed knotted, the couple would struggle. To break the curse, they'd have to find the rope and untie every single knot in the correct order, starting with the first you tied. But if you'd hidden it well, inside a wall, under a floorboard, in the thatching of a roof, they'd never find it. Their relationship would slowly, painfully collapse, and they'd never understand why they couldn't stop fighting, why affection had died, why the person they once loved now repulsed them. And then there was the darkest love magic of all, murder disguised as devotion. If someone was truly desperate, if they'd been rejected, humiliated in front of the whole village, or betrayed by a lover who'd promised marriage and then married someone else, they could visit a cunning woman and request a death curse. The most common method was a "pop it again," but this time filled with thorns from blackberry bushes, nails stolen from a coffin, and broken glass from a church window. The cunning woman would baptize the poppet with the target's name, sometimes using holy water stolen from church, a perversion of sacred ritual. Then slowly, over weeks or months, she'd torture it. She'd stick pins into its heart while chanting the target's name, burn its feet in candle flame, bury it near running water so it would drown symbolically, hang it from a tree so it would strangle, and supposedly the target would weaken, fall ill with mysterious ailments, suffer chest pains, shortness of breath, nightmares, where they were drowning or burning, eventually die. Was this real? Did people actually die from poppet curses? No, obviously not, but people believed they would, and belief is a powerful psychological weapon. If you knew someone had cursed you, if you heard whispers that a cunning woman in the next village was torturing a doll with your name, you'd panic, lose sleep, stop eating, make yourself sick with fear. Your body would respond to the terror. Your heart would race constantly. Your immune system would weaken. And then you'd die, not from magic, but from the stress of believing you were doomed. Love magic in Tudor England wasn't about romance. It was about control, obsession, and fear. It was about exerting power in a world where most people, especially women, had none. Where marriages were arranged by fathers and priests an economic necessity. Where desire was considered sinful unless channeled into producing legitimate heirs. Where saying "I want you" could get you laughed at or beaten, or married off to someone else as punishment for having desires. And sometimes it was about revenge, about destroying what you couldn't have, about ensuring that if you had to be miserable, everyone else would be too. The Tudors did not see animals the way we do. Pets weren't companions providing comfort and unconditional love. They were omens, messengers from the spirit world, sometimes demons in disguise wearing fur and feathers. Let's start with cats. In Tudor England, owning a cat, especially a black cat, was dangerous. Not just socially awkward, genuinely life-threatening. Cats were believed to be witches' familiars, demons in animal form that served dark purposes. They could spy for their mistress, sitting on windowsills and reporting what they saw, deliver curses by scratching victims, even kill on command by stealing breath or spreading disease. If a cat stared at you too long, it was reading your soul, examining you for weaknesses, reporting back to its witch owner about which curses would hurt you most. If it hissed at you when you approached, it was marking you for misfortune, placing an invisible sigil on your chest that would attract bad luck. If it sat on your chest while you slept, it was trying to steal your breath and suffocate you, its weight pressing down on your lungs until you stopped breathing. This wasn't paranoia, this was documented belief. Witch trial records are full of descriptions of cats being killed, sometimes dozens at once, gathered from accused witches' homes and surrounding properties, thrown into cages and burned alive alongside their accused owners. The screaming of dying cats mixed with the screaming of dying women, creating a sound witnesses described as demonic, as proof that evil was being purged. And black cats? They were proof of witchcraft all by themselves. Simply owning one could get you arrested, questioned, tortured, until you confessed to using it for magic. Keeping one inside your home meant you were consorting with evil, feeding it blood, letting it sleep in your bed, while you whispered instructions for curses and hexes. But it wasn't just cats. Toads and frogs were witches' ingredients. Cunning women supposedly kept them in jars and boxes, used them in potions, sacrificed them in rituals. If you found a toad in your house, hopping through your kitchen or sitting in your pantry, it had been sent to curse you. The solution was immediate and violent. Kill it with a shovel or rock. Burn the corpse, or nail it to your door as a warning to other witches that you were protected, that you wouldn't tolerate magical attack. Hares were shapeshifters. Witches could transform into hares to escape capture or spy on their enemies, their human consciousness trapped in animal form. If you saw a hare running through your field at dawn, it might be your neighbour Margaret checking on your crops before cursing them. Shooting it would cause the witch to appear the next day with an injury in the same spot. Shot the hare in the leg, Margaret would be limping. Shot it in the side, she'd clutch her ribs and complain of mysterious pain. There are actual court records of people being accused of witchcraft because someone shot a hare and a local woman showed up injured the next morning. The logic was airtight to Tudor minds. The hare vanished. The woman appeared wounded. Obviously, they were the same entity. The woman would be arrested, questioned, often tortured, and sometimes executed based solely on this coincidence. Owls were death omens. Hearing an owl hoot near your home meant someone inside would die within 3 days. The owl was a messenger from the underworld, announcing that death was coming to collect. To prevent this, you had to throw salt into the fire immediately, creating loud popping sounds to scare death away. Turn your pockets inside out to confuse the omen. Tie knots in your shoelaces to bind the death prediction and prevent it from coming true. Some people would stay awake for 3 days straight, believing that if they slept, death would take them in their sleep. Ravens and crows were messengers from the spirit world. A raven landing on your roof meant bad news was coming, usually a death in the family or financial ruin. A crow circling your house 3 times meant death was selecting its victim, deciding who to take. If a crow cawed at you directly, looked you in the eye and vocalized, you'd been cursed. You needed to spit 3 times. Make the sign of the cross and say a prayer immediately. If you didn't, misfortune would follow you like a shadow. Spiders were good luck unless you killed one. Then you'd have 7 years of misfortune. The phrase, "if you wish to live and thrive, let the spider run alive," was a genuine warning people took seriously. They'd carefully escort spiders out of their homes, using brooms to sweep them gently toward doors, never crushing them. Some believed spiders ate bad luck, consumed the negativity in a home, and killing them meant that negativity had nowhere to go except into you. But bees were sacred. You had to tell them everything. This one's actually charming in a bizarre way. Tudor households believed bees needed to be informed of all major events, births, deaths, marriages, even arguments between family members. The bees were part of the household, participants in human affairs, and excluding them from news was insulting. If someone in the family died, you had to go to the beehive, knock gently 3 times to get their attention, and whisper, "The master is dead," or "The mistress has passed." If you didn't tell them, they'd leave. The entire hive would swarm away, taking the family's luck and prosperity with them. Worse, they might die overnight, all of them, because grief at being excluded had killed them. This practice, called telling the bees, continued well into the 19th century. It wasn't just rural superstition. City dwellers did it too. Rich families had servants whose job included informing the bees of household changes. Horses were particularly magical. A white horse brought good luck if you saw it before noon. After noon, the luck reversed. A piebald horse, spotted black and white, was bad luck unless you spat the moment you saw it. Horses could see ghosts, could sense spirits in the road. If your horse suddenly refused to cross a certain spot, snorting and backing away despite your commands, something evil was there. A ghost, a fairy ring, a spot where someone had been murdered. You didn't question it. You didn't force the horse forward. You turned around and found a different route, even if it added hours to your journey. And if a horse suddenly went lame for no reason, if it was fine one morning and limping by afternoon with no visible injury, someone had cursed it. You'd have to hang iron horseshoes around the stable, carve protective symbols into the door, and sometimes sacrifice a chicken and bury it under the threshold to absorb the curse. Chickens had their own omens. A rooster crowing at midnight was terrible. It meant the devil was near, walking through your village, looking for souls to claim. A hen crowing like a rooster was worse. It meant someone in the household would die, usually the oldest woman. The hen had become confused about its nature, and that confusion signaled cosmic disorder. To prevent the death, you'd kill the hen immediately, wring its neck, pluck it, cook it, eat it before sunset. Consuming the omen supposedly nullified it. Magpies, as mentioned earlier, required specific rituals. But seeing 2 magpies meant joy, 3 meant a wedding, 4 meant a birth, 5 meant silver, 6 meant gold, 7 meant a secret never to be told. People planned their days around magpie sightings, delayed travel, postponed proposals, moved wedding dates, all because of how many black and white birds they saw. Robins were beloved and protected. Killing a robin was one of the worst things you could do. It would bring a curse on your household that lasted 7 years. Your cows would give bloody milk. Your chickens would stop laying eggs. Your children would fall ill with mysterious fevers. Why? Because robins were believed to carry souls of the dead, to be reincarnations or vessels. Killing one meant damaging a human spirit, and that spirit would seek revenge. But the strangest animal superstition of all? Moths. If a white moth flew into your house through an open window or door, someone was about to die. If it landed on you, touching your skin with its dusty wings, you were the one dying. People would panic, chase the moth out with brooms, shout prayers, and sometimes burn purifying herbs afterward, filling the room with smoke to cleanse whatever death energy the moth had brought. Moths were souls, lost souls, the dead who hadn't moved on, who were trapped between worlds, still seeking something, and they came to collect the living, to bring them back to the spirit realm. In Tudor England, every rustle in the bushes, every shadow that moved wrong, every animal encounter was a message. The natural world was alive with intent. Nothing was innocent, nothing was random. Your dog wasn't just barking at a stranger. It was warning you about a threat you couldn't see. Your cat wasn't just sleeping on the chair. It was watching you, judging you, possibly reporting to forces you couldn't comprehend. That bird outside your window wasn't just singing its morning song. It was delivering a prophecy about your future. And if you ignored these signs, if you dismissed them as mere coincidence, as natural animal behaviour, you did so at your own peril. Because the Tudors knew something we've forgotten. The world is full of forces we can't see. Invisible hands shaping events, spirits walking among us, magic woven into the fabric of existence, and animals, unburdened by human arrogance and rationality, could see it all clearly. They were messengers, warnings, sometimes threats, and you ignored them at your own risk. Death in Tudor England wasn't an ending. It was a transition, and not always a peaceful one. The Tudors believed the dead walked among the living constantly. Ghosts weren't rare sightings discussed in hushed tones around fires. They were everywhere, in churchyards, on roads, inside homes, standing at the foot of your bed, watching you sleep. Churchyards at night were absolute no-go zones. Walking through a graveyard after dark was suicidal. Not because of criminals or wolves, though those were threats too, but because the dead would rise and follow you home. They'd attach themselves to you like leeches, feeding on your life force, draining you slowly until you weakened and died and joined them. Ghosts weren't gentle, misty apparitions that glowed softly and spoke in whispers. They were solid, angry, and dangerous. They could touch you, push you, hurt you. Ghosts had been seen shoving people downstairs, their cold hands on warm backs, strangling sleepers, their transparent fingers leaving real bruises on real throats, driving people mad with constant whispers, voices that spoke your name at night when you were alone. If you died with unfinished business, unpaid debts, unconfessed sins, a hidden murder, your soul couldn't rest. You'd be trapped between worlds, forced to wander until the issue was resolved. And if no one helped you, if no one discovered your secret or paid your debt or found your killer, you'd haunt forever. Violently. The most common ghost was the murder victim. If someone was killed and the murderer wasn't caught, the victim's spirit would haunt the area of death, screaming, pointing at suspects, sometimes literally appearing in front of witnesses to reveal the truth. There are court records, actual legal documents, where judges accepted ghost testimony. A man would confess to murder because the victim's ghost had appeared to multiple witnesses, pointed at him, and spoken his name. The ghost's accusation was considered evidence. This wasn't folklore passed down through generations and embellished. This was law. This was how justice sometimes worked. To protect yourself from ghosts, you had options. Always carry iron, nails in your pocket, scissors tucked into your belt, a horseshoe hung over your door. Ghosts couldn't cross iron. They'd recoil from it like fire, unable to touch anyone carrying it. Pour a line of salt across your threshold at night before sleeping. Spirits couldn't cross it. The salt created a barrier, a line between worlds. Leave offerings for the dead on All Hallows Eve, what we now call Halloween. Bread and milk on your doorstep, small cakes, a cup of ale. If you fed them, they'd leave you alone, satisfied that they were remembered. Pray constantly. Prayers, especially the Lord's Prayer, were shields against spiritual attack. Reciting scripture could banish ghosts, send them back to wherever they came from. And if you felt a presence following you at night, if the hair on your neck stood up and you heard footsteps behind you that matched your own, never look back. Never turn around. Acknowledging it gave it power, allowed it to fully manifest and harm you. Keep walking, keep praying. Don't turn around no matter how loudly it breathes or how clearly you hear it whisper your name. But the worst ghost of all wasn't a murder victim or a restless spirit with unfinished business. It was a suicide. If someone took their own life, they couldn't be buried in consecrated ground. They'd committed the ultimate sin, rejected God's gift of life, damned themselves eternally. Their body would be taken to a crossroads and buried with a stake through the heart to pin them down, to prevent them from rising and walking. Why crossroads? Because confused spirits wander. At a crossroads, with 4 directions to choose from, they'd be lost forever, unable to find their way to haunt anyone. They'd spin in circles for eternity, never moving forward, never finding peace. But even then, their ghosts were restless, more restless than any other kind. Angry at their exclusion from holy ground, furious at the stake through their chest, they'd manifest as shadows that moved against the light, as cold spots in warm rooms, as sudden overwhelming feelings of dread that made people flee without understanding why. And children who died unbaptized, they became something far worse than ghosts. They became the perfect targets for fairies. Which brings us to the next nightmare. Forget Tinkerbell, forget Disney. Tudor fairies were malicious, dangerous, and absolutely real in the minds of ordinary people. They weren't cute little beings with gossamer wings granting wishes. They were kidnappers, thieves, and tormentors who lived in the wild places, forests and meadows and under hills, and they hated humans with passionate envy. Fairies wanted what humans had: healthy children, warm homes, full bellies, strong bodies. So they stole, they took, they replaced. Changelings were the ultimate nightmare. If you didn't protect your newborn properly, if you left it alone even for a moment, fairies would sneak into your home at night, silent as smoke, take your baby, and leave one of their own sickly, twisted offspring in its place. How did you know if your baby was a changeling? It cried constantly, a sound that wasn't quite human, too shrill, too persistent. It refused to eat, turning its head away from the breast or bottle. It didn't grow, staying the same size month after month while other babies thrived. It had a strange wizened face, looking ancient and knowing, eyes too old for an infant. It seemed aware in ways babies shouldn't be, following movements with intelligence that unnerved everyone who held it. Some parents, convinced their child had been swapped, would do unspeakable things. Leave it outside overnight in the cold, believing the fairies would take pity and swap it back for the real baby. Threaten it with fire, holding it near flames to make the fairy child reveal itself and flee. Submerge it in cold water, thinking the shock would force the changeling to speak and confess. Beat it, sometimes to death, believing they were punishing an imposter, not their own sick child. There are documented cases of babies being killed because parents believed they were changelings. Court records, trial transcripts, defences that argued it wasn't our child, it was a fairy creature. And sometimes, horrifyingly, communities agreed, understood, didn't prosecute because everyone knew changelings were real. And what else could you do when your baby was clearly wrong? To prevent this horror, you had to follow specific rituals. Never leave a baby alone before baptism. The unbaptized soul was vulnerable, unprotected by God, easy prey for fairies. Place iron scissors, open in a cross shape, over the cradle. The iron would repel them. The cross shape doubled the protection. Hang bells above the crib. Fairies hated bells, hated noise, hated anything that attracted human attention. Tie red thread around the baby's wrist. Red was life, blood, vitality. It repelled evil the way light repels darkness. And never, ever compliment the baby. Saying, "What a beautiful child," invited fairy attention. Made them notice your baby, made them want it. Instead, you'd insult it. What an ugly little thing. Such a homely creature. Reverse psychology on a cosmic scale. If the fairies thought the baby was worthless, they wouldn't bother stealing it. But fairies didn't just steal babies, they stole adults too. If someone wandered into the woods and didn't return, if they vanished during a walk or while gathering firewood, they'd been taken by the fairies. Led into the fairy realm through invisible doorways where time moved differently. They'd think they'd been gone for a night, enjoying fairy music and dancing. But when they returned, decades had passed. Their children were old, their spouse remarried, their home occupied by strangers. Or they'd return immediately, within hours, but wrong, distant, forgetful. Not quite themselves. They'd stare at nothing. Forget loved ones' names, speak in fragments. The fairies had touched their mind, stolen pieces of their memory, left them hollow. Fairy rings, circles of mushrooms that appeared overnight in fields and forests, were doorways to the fairy world. Stepping inside one was forbidden. You'd be trapped, forced to dance until you died of exhaustion, your feet bleeding, your body exhausted, but unable to stop moving because the music wouldn't stop. The fairy music that played inside your head forever. If you found a fairy ring, you walked around it, far around it, added extra minutes to your journey just to avoid passing through. And if someone you knew stepped inside one, even accidentally, you didn't go after them. You let them go, because trying to rescue them would trap you too. Fairy music was deadly. If you heard music in the woods at night, ethereal and beautiful, more perfect than any human instrument could produce, you had to cover your ears and run. Listening to it would entrance you, pull you toward the source, and you'd never leave. You'd stand there forever, swaying, smiling, while your body withered and your mind emptied. Offerings were necessary. People left out bowls of milk, bread or honey for the fairies every night. Not out of kindness, not out of generosity, out of fear. If you didn't feed them, they'd sour your milk as revenge. Kill your chickens for spite, cause your crops to fail through invisible curses. Burn your house with fairy fire that left no smoke. Better to sacrifice a bit of food than risk their wrath. And certain people were more vulnerable. Pregnant women, because fairies wanted babies. New mothers for the same reason. Redheads, because red hair was a sign of fairy blood somewhere in the lineage. People born during a full moon. Children who laughed too much, showing too much joy. If you fit one of these categories, you had to be extra careful. You couldn't dance alone in the moonlight. You couldn't nap under a tree. You couldn't pick wildflowers from certain fields. All of these things invited fairy attention. And once they noticed you, they'd never leave you alone. They'd follow you, whisper to you, appear in the corner of your vision, make you see things that weren't there, hear things that didn't exist, drive you slowly mad until you wandered into the woods one night and never came back. The Tudors didn't see fairies as whimsical creatures from children's stories. They saw them as parasites, dangerous, envious, and always watching from the edges of civilization, waiting for humans to make mistakes. Medicine and magic were the same thing in Tudor England, and both were rooted in plants. But here's the catch. The line between cure and poison was razor thin, barely visible, and crossing it meant the difference between healing and death. Mandrake root was the most infamous. It grew in the shape of a tiny human figure, legs and arms, and sometimes even what looked like a face. The Tudors believed this meant it contained a captured soul, a human essence trapped in plant form. Pulling it from the ground supposedly made it scream, a sound so loud and so terrible, it would kill anyone who heard it instantly. So how did you harvest it? You'd tie a dog to the plant, step back several yards, cover your ears, and call the dog. The dog would run toward you, pulling the mandrake free. The dog would die from the scream, convulsing and bleeding from the ears, but you'd have the root, you'd have the magic. Mandrake was used for everything. Love potions, because it looked human and therefore understood human desire. Pain relief, because it contained actual analgesic properties. Fertility treatments, because its shape suggested reproduction. Inducing visions, because it was also poisonous and caused hallucinations. It was also frequently fatal. Dosing it correctly required knowledge most people didn't have. Too little, and it did nothing. Too much and you'd convulse, foam at the mouth, and die while seeing demons. Foxglove, called digitalis by those educated in Latin, was used to treat heart problems. It worked. It actually worked. Digitalis is still used today in cardiac medicine. But the dose had to be perfect. Too little, and it did nothing. Too much, and it stopped your heart entirely. Cunning women who knew how to dose it were revered, treated almost like saints. Those who got it wrong were hanged as poisoners or burned as witches. The line between healer and murderer was just a few drops of tincture. Belladonna, deadly nightshade, was a beauty product. Women used it to dilate their pupils, making their eyes look larger and more alluring, more innocent and doe-like. Hence the name Belladonna, beautiful woman. They'd squeeze drops of belladonna juice into their eyes before going out, enduring the burning sensation, the temporary blindness, all for beauty. It was also a powerful hallucinogen and a deadly poison. An overdose sometimes from just one extra drop, caused seizures, paralysis, and death. But vanity demanded risks. Beauty required sacrifice. Hemlock was a classic poison. Socrates famously drank it. In Tudor England, it was used to murder rivals, unwanted spouses, and political enemies. It caused paralysis starting in the legs, creeping upward like cold water rising, working its way through your body until it reached your lungs, and you suffocated, fully conscious the entire time, unable to move or speak or cry out for help, just waiting for death to finish its slow climb. Henbane caused violent hallucinations. It was one of the main ingredients in flying ointments, salves that witches supposedly rubbed on their skin before flying on broomsticks to attend sabbats. In reality, it caused delirium and the sensation of floating, of weightlessness. Users would strip naked, rub the ointment on themselves, and genuinely believe they were flying. They weren't. They were having seizures and hallucinations, but the experience was so vivid, so real, that they'd swear they'd flown. They'd describe clouds, wind, the faces of demons they'd met in the air. Mugwort was protective. Hanging it over your door kept evil spirits away. They'd smell it and turn back, unable to enter. Sleeping with it under your pillow gave prophetic dreams, visions of the future that would help you avoid danger. Drinking it as tea eased menstrual pain, though it also sometimes caused miscarriages, which is why pregnant women were warned to never touch it. Yarrow stopped bleeding. Soldiers carried it into battle, kept bundles of it in their packs. If you were wounded, you'd pack yarrow into the wound, pressing it deep. It actually worked. Yarrow has natural clotting properties. It saved countless lives. But it also caused infections if the yarrow wasn't fresh, or if it had been contaminated with soil. St. John's wort treated sadness, what we'd now call depression. It actually does have mild antidepressant effects. Modern science has confirmed what the Tudors knew through experimentation. But they believed it worked by driving out demons, by exorcising the evil spirits that caused melancholy. They'd make tea from it, drink it daily, and slowly feel their mood lift. Was it the plant's chemistry, or was it demonic possession being cured? To them, there was no difference. Rosemary was for memory and mourning. Brides carried it in their bouquets to remember their vows. Mourners tossed it into graves so the dead would remember them in the afterlife. Students wore it in their hair during exams, woven into crowns, believing it would help them recall information. There's an actual chemical reason for this. Rosemary does improve memory and concentration, but the Tudors thought it was magic. Lavender calmed nerves and repelled insects. It was strewn on floors, crushed underfoot to release its scent, sewn into pillows to ease nightmares, burned as incense to purify rooms after illness or argument. It actually worked for all of these things. But people died believing it worked because God blessed it, not because of chemistry. But the most dangerous plant wasn't one people used intentionally. It was ergot. Ergot was a fungus that grew on rye, especially during damp seasons. When baked into bread, which was the staple food for poor people, it caused ergotism, a condition that included convulsions, hallucinations, gangrenous limbs that turned black and fell off, and death. It's believed ergot poisoning caused some of the witch trial hysteria. People having seizures weren't possessed, they were poisoned. People seeing visions weren't communing with demons. They were hallucinating from contaminated bread. But no one knew that. No one understood. So they burned the victims as witches, which meant the poisoned bread remained, and more people ate it, and more people died or went mad. Plant knowledge was power. Women who knew herbs could heal, could ease pain, could save lives. But they could also kill, poison an unfaithful husband, eliminate a rival, curse a neighbour, and that made them both valuable and terrifying. If you were skilled with plants, if you knew which ones stopped bleeding and which ones stopped hearts, you were a cunning woman. People came to you for help, paid you in food or coin, respected you. But if you were too skilled, if your knowledge seemed unnatural, If people wondered how you knew so much about death disguised as medicine, you were a witch, and the only difference between respected healer and burned witch was whether someone liked you, whether you'd helped them or refused them, whether they were grateful or vengeful. In Tudor England, weather wasn't random. It wasn't just atmospheric pressure and temperature gradients and water vapor. It was controlled by magic. And if your crops failed because of a storm, if hail destroyed your harvest, or drought cracked your fields, or flood drowned your seeds, someone was to blame. Someone had cursed the sky itself. Weather witches were a specific type of witch. They could summon storms, ruin harvests, and destroy entire villages with hail, wind, or drought. How? By making pacts with demons, by performing rituals at midnight, on hilltops, by cursing the sky with words and gestures and offerings of blood. If a sudden storm destroyed your crops, you'd look for the witch, and you'd find her. Usually, a woman who'd been seen muttering to herself, or a woman who lived alone on the edge of the village, or a woman who'd asked for food and been refused. There are trial records where women were executed because a storm happened after they'd been denied charity. The logic was simple and ironclad to Tudor minds. She cursed you out of spite. She asked for bread. You refused. She muttered something under her breath. The next day, a storm destroyed your wheat. Obviously, she caused it. Obviously, she's a witch. Obviously, she must burn. To protect your crops from weather witches, you had to perform counter magic. Bury iron horseshoes at the four corners of your field. Hang bells from poles to ring in the wind, the noise disrupting magical working. Make a corn dolly, a figure woven from wheat stalks, and place it in the centre of your field as a guardian. Pray constantly while working. And, most importantly, never refuse charity to anyone who asked. Because any beggar could be a witch. Any homeless woman could be a weather witch testing you, and refusing her meant she'd destroy everything you owned. Some storms were natural, some were divine punishment. But in Tudor England, distinguishing between God's wrath, natural weather, and witch-caused disaster was impossible. So you assumed everything was magic. Every storm was personal. Every drought was a curse. Every flood was revenge. And you burned witches by the dozens, hoping that would make the weather better. Sometimes it did. Because weather is cyclical. Droughts end, storms pass. And when the weather improved after a witch burning, it was proof the magic had worked. Proof that eliminating the witch had saved everyone. The fact that innocent women died screaming didn't matter. What mattered was that the crops grew again. And in Tudor England, that was all the proof anyone needed, that superstition wasn't just belief, it was survival. What passengers on this particular ship of superstition didn't fully understand was that these beliefs weren't separate from daily life. They were daily life. Every action, every decision, every moment was governed by invisible rules, cosmic forces, magical thinking that controlled everything from when you cut your nails to whether you'd survive childbirth. The Tudors lived in a world where nothing was random. Everything was a sign. Every action had cosmic weight. And the only way to survive was to follow the rules, perform the rituals, believe with absolute conviction that magic was real, and that failing to respect it would destroy you. They weren't stupid. They were desperate. Living in a world that killed them in ways they couldn't understand, they created explanations, created systems, created beliefs that gave them some sense of control, however false, however small. And when we look back now and laugh at their superstitions, when we shake our heads at the absurdity of evil eyes and weather witches and changeling babies, maybe we should remember something. We're only 400 years away from them. And in 400 years, what will people think of our beliefs? Our certainties? Our desperate attempts to control an uncontrollable world? Maybe they'll laugh at us too. Maybe they'll wonder how we could believe the things we do. Maybe they'll see our world as just as magical, just as superstitious, just as terrified as Tudor England. Because in the end, that's what superstition really is. Not ignorance, but fear, and the very human need to believe that if we just follow the rules, if we just do everything right, maybe, just maybe, we'll survive one more day.